Okay, everybody, it's me, Mr. Auerbach, and I have decided to start doing a new thing, which is to do kind of a guided tour of some of the presentations that I've created, because some people say they're a little bit confused. So I want to walk through this one. This is the cellular respiration one, just to give you some idea of a few things about how this works. Anyway, the very first thing is that you can't look at it like this. Like if you're seeing all the slides over here and you can interact with the screen, this is not what I want. I want you to do this in present mode, because that's the only way that you're going to see all of the stuff I want you to see. There's layers and layers of animations. And so if you're staring at these slides wondering why you don't understand what's going on, part of the reason might be that you're just not in the right mode. So anyway, again, I'll escape. You hit escape to get out of this, and then you're back. What we're going to do is we're going to take a walk through the cellular respiration presentation. And here it is. How do living things use chemical reactions to get energy from food? That is what I am talking about. Everybody's got to eat, right? That's what this starts. And cellular respiration is how we get the energy out of the food that we eat. Okay, so this is all introductory stuff. This is kind of the model as we build it. These are the things that we've kind of learned. Everything in black is stuff that is what we've already had, and then the new material is in red. So not only do we take matter from our food, as all of these parts say, but also we use the rest of it for energy. So you remember the coma patient. The reason the coma patient didn't gain any weight, even though they were putting out 3 pounds less food than they were taking in, is because they were using it for energy. Rearranging matter gives energy because molecules have potential energy. That's something that we've talked about. So when the reactants have more potential energy than the product, then energy is released. So like when you burn fuel or sugar and go down to carbon dioxide and water, they have lower energy, so that releases energy, like burning wood or whatever. And then in the opposite, if you have to put energy into the products, so you start with low energy reactants, and then you put energy in, and that creates high energy products. That's what we call an uphill reaction, where you have to put energy in, endothermic. So exothermic is when you release energy. Endothermic is when you absorb energy for a chemical reaction. So how do we get energy from our food? Well, we get energy from our food the same way that we get energy from burning anything. Carbon fuel plus oxygen gives energy, plus it leads to the low energy carbon dioxide and water products. Carbon fuel can be anything. That can be wood, that can be natural gas, that could be sugar, that could be food. And then oxygen is the other requirement for burning. So you got your carbon fuel and you've got oxygen, which is, what you need to start a fire, right? You can't have a fire without oxygen, and that's what I'm talking about. So any carbon fuel, wood, wax, coal, you burn it, you release energy, and you end up with low energy byproducts. This goes back to our bowling ball analogy. When you have a lot of chemical potential energy, that's the same thing that these carbon fuels have. They have a lot of chemical potential energy, and they can release it. And it's like the bowling ball rolling down the hill is the release of energy. So in this case, it asks what are the reactants and the products. And in this case, when you have a chemical reaction, you always can tell by the arrow here, and the reactants are usually on the left side. In this case, carbon fuel, which could be wax, coal, wood, plus oxygen. Those are the reactants. And on the right-hand side of the reaction are the products. And so that is what this question was asking about, reactants and products. And so what this is talking about is that burning food is just like burning any carbon fuel. You start with high potential energy, sugar, right? Sugar has energy for us. You add oxygen, you release the energy, and you end up with the same two products, carbon dioxide and water. So this whole set of slides is just making the point that burning food is a lot like burning any other fuel. You add oxygen to it, you release energy, and you end up with low energy byproducts. You can't get any more energy out of carbon dioxide and water. So food is fuel, and that is the point. You release just as much energy from your frosted flakes as you would from the same mass of burning the same mass of brown coal, believe it or not, or 40 milliliters of ethanol, which we burned in one of the other presentations. Okay, so this question asks about another issue, which is that, okay, so if I can get as much energy out of a bowl of cereal as I can from the same amount of coal, what could be the problem with that happening inside of our cells? And you are asked to think about that. Like, what if we really did burn these fuels inside of our cells in the same way that we burn them in our, a wood stove or our gas oven or whatever? And so just think about that. Why could that be kind of an issue? And then honestly, right after that, we sort of get into the answers. And combustion reactions, which is any time you're burning fuel, it happens all at once in one big step, and the energy is released as fire. And, well, fire maybe not so good inside of the cells. And so instead, what happens in our cells is that we do it a little bit at a time. You release a small amount of energy in one of lots of different steps. So by the time you're done with it, you release exactly the same amount of energy, but it doesn't happen all at once. It happens little bits at a time, and with each reaction, you release a little bit of energy, and you don't have any open flame that would hurt us. Okay, so then the next question is, how does that energy get captured and used? And the answer is a molecule called ATP, which I'm going to remind you you were supposed to read about in Chapter 4, Section 1, which was about ATP. And so there's a little bit about ATP here. ATP is a transport molecule for energy in the cell, and you really have to look at this diagram a little bit to get what's going on. But the point is, ATP is like a full battery. And so you go from ADP to ATP by adding energy. ADP is adenosine diphosphate with two phosphates. ATP is adenosine triphosphate. So by adding that third phosphate on, you're storing energy in this molecule. And so when you put ADP next to a reaction that releases energy, you can use that energy to attach that third phosphate on there. And if you don't totally understand, it's okay. There's a chapter about it, 4.1, that you can read, or just sort of take my word for it, that you take energy and save it in the form of ATP. And so when you rearrange the molecule glucose and add oxygen, then that energy that's released is captured in an ATP molecule. And ATP is the only thing that gets used in the cell. So cells are a little bit different. ATP is often described as being like money. Like you might get your paycheck from your boss, but you can't take that paycheck into 7-Eleven, right? And get yourself a soda. You have to take that paycheck and put it in the bank and get cash out. And that's the same thing as stuff that you eat. I eat food, and that's supposed to give you energy, but you actually don't get the energy until you convert that food into ATP. So you put it through cellular respiration to make ATP, and that is what goes to work in your cells. So it gets made in the mitochondria of your cells, and then it goes wherever it's needed in the cell. And so when you do this reaction of releasing the ATP, or releasing the energy a little bit at a time, you capture ATP in different parts of the chemical reaction cycle of cellular respiration. And by the time it's done, you can have as much as 36 or even 38 ATP molecules produced from a single glucose molecule being combined with oxygen. So then they can do stuff in the cell. So the point is, when you take this ATP to someplace in the cell to do work, you do that work, and then it goes back to being ADP. So it has lots of energy here, and then once it uses that energy, it goes back to this, and it has to get filled up again in another round of cellular respiration. So it's like ATP is just like your phone battery. You just keep charging it and using it and charging it and using it. Except instead of plugging it in an outlet, you plug it in the mitochondria. So here's a question that asks you whether ATP and ADP are endothermic or exothermic. So breaking down ATP into ADP releases energy. Turning ADP into ATP, that takes energy. So I want you to think about that. If something releases energy versus whether it takes in energy to happen, which of those is exothermic and which is endothermic? You might have to look that up, but I want you to think about that. So here's a reminder of exothermic and endothermic reactions. The one on the left is endothermic because energy is absorbed. The one on the right is exothermic because energy is released. And just again, a little reminder, the mitochondria is the organelle in the cells where ATP is made. And it says here muscles have a bunch of mitochondria, because if you think about it, what kind of cells need the most energy? Like muscle cells, because we're using them. And so if you take a look at this and think about it, so you've got your ATPs that are formed in the mitochondria, and then they can go wherever they need to in the cell to do other work, bringing that energy with them. So there's a constant stream of energy molecules in the form of ATP coming from mitochondria and going all around the cell to do all the work that needs to be done. And then when they do that work, they're turned back into ADP, and they come back to the mitochondria, which is like their gas station or their charging station. Okay, hopefully that helps. That is what's up. And there's a bonus question. I made a mistake here. If anybody wants to put into their document what the mistake is that I made on the last slide, I just saw it now. But anyway, folks, that is what I have. Thank you very much for your time, and let me know if you have any questions about this, okay?